Her only son stood in her kitchen, bragging about the day he'd bulldoze her rose garden. Lena Garrison, widow and co-founder of the home around them, didn't flinch. Dean, the boy she'd once rocked to sleep, sipped her coffee and called it progress. By week's end, his name would vanish from her will, her deed, and every account he'd once touched. She'd spent a lifetime as his mother. Now she was the guardian of her own future. And when he came back for the house, the law would answer with a locked gate. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The house smelled like lilies and stale coffee. Lena Garrison sat at the head of the long oak table, her late husband's chair now hers by default. It was the only seat in the house that didn't creak. Jim had sanded it by hand 40 years ago, back when the wood was new and their patience was long. Today, the table was dressed in muted linens and forgotten casseroles. No one had touched the deviled eggs. Dean leaned back in his chair, arms folded across his chest, a practiced smirk creeping up one side of his face. He turned toward Rita, close enough that he probably thought Lena wouldn't hear. "She's not even a real widow," he muttered with a dry chuckle. "He was half gone for years." Rita pressed her lips together, then gave the tiniest shrug. Not quite agreement, but not disagreement either. The kind of shrug that said you're not wrong, but maybe not out loud. Lena didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't even blink. She just slid her eyes across the table, past the untouched food and the whispering lips, and locked that moment away like a pressed leaf in a heavy book. Crisp, preserved, undeniable. A silence thinned the air, the kind that lingers when someone says something unforgivable and no one's sure if it landed. Mallory noticed it first. She'd been watching Lena's hands, delicate, veined, still steady, wrapped around her fork like it was the last piece of control in the room, her thumb pressed into the silver like she could leave an imprint. "So," Rita said suddenly, too brightly, her voice slicing through the awkward pause, "we'll probably just list the house soon. Right, Mom? Before the market shifts again." Lena didn't answer, not immediately. She set her fork down with care. Not clinking, not hurried, just a slow, deliberate tap against the edge of her plate. Then she folded her napkin and placed it in her lap like she had somewhere far more important to be. Mallory tilted her head, brow furrowing, her mouth parting just slightly. "Excuse me," Lena said quietly. She pushed her chair back without the scrape of legs. Not a single dish clattered. Just the whisper of her heels across the hardwood as she rose and walked out of the room. Dean chuckled again, louder this time. "Jesus, can no one take a joke anymore?" Rita elbowed him gently. "Let her have her moment. She's old. It's probably overwhelming." But Mallory didn't look at them. She watched her grandmother's back disappear up the stairs, shoulders drawn straight, posture impossibly calm. Not grief, not collapse. Something else. Upstairs, the air was cooler, not from the thermostat, but from the stillness. Lena moved down the hallway like a woman retracing her own history, passing framed photos. Jim with his arm around her on their first porch swing, Mallory's preschool graduation, a Christmas morning with Dean holding a toy truck he'd later abandon in the attic. At the end of the hall was a door with a brass knob that stuck slightly. She twisted it open, revealing the small study, quiet, untouched, and stepped inside. The safe was behind the third cabinet drawer, tucked beneath decades of birth certificates, appliance manuals, and a dusty shoebox full of expired checks. She knelt slowly, her knees cracking just once. The combination clicked on the first try. Inside was what mattered, not the cash, not the documents, but a single envelope with her late husband's handwriting, a date written in his unshakable block letters. And behind it, the folded copy of her own estate draft, unsigned, unfinished, waiting. Her fingers hovered over them both, then stopped. She didn't take them out. Not yet. Downstairs, laughter echoed again, brittle and tinny, like something you'd hear in a bad sitcom. Dean was talking louder now, telling a story about Jim forgetting names near the end. Rita corrected him on the details. Someone opened a second bottle of wine. Lena closed the safe. Stood. She walked to the window. The foothills looked exactly the same as they had the day she and Jim laid the first beam into the soil. solid, patient, unmoved by time or arrogance. Her phone buzzed once. A text from Tom Daly. "You say the word? I'm ready when you are?" She didn't reply. She just looked out the window and whispered, "Let them keep talking." The morning after the brunch, the house was too quiet. The lilies had wilted overnight, leaning over in their vases like they'd seen enough. Lena stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a single mug, the only dish not left behind by Dean and Rita. The rest sat where they'd been abandoned, lipstick on the rims, crumbs on the platters, someone's fork face down in congealed mashed potatoes. She didn't touch any of it. The back door creaked open. Rita's voice filtered in before her face did. "We should probably start the estate conversation soon, just to make sure there's clarity. We don't want it to feel messy." Dean stepped in behind her, jangling his car keys like a punctuation mark. "We'll split it fair." "Of course. It's what Dad would have wanted." Lena turned, mug still in hand. She looked at them both like someone watching strangers give directions to a place they'd never lived. Her eyes didn't blink, didn't narrow, just studied. Rita smiled with too many teeth. "We just want to make sure you're not overwhelmed by all the legal stuff, probate and deed transfers and such. It's all very complicated at your age." Dean chuckled. The same chuckle from yesterday. "Yeah, we'll handle it all. Don't worry." Lena dried her hands slowly, folded the towel, hung it just so. Then, with no reply, she walked right past them and up the stairs. Mallory, halfway down the hall, caught the quiet storm in her grandmother's face and stepped aside. Lena didn't say a word. The air trailing behind her felt sharp, like the wind before a lightning strike. The drawer in the study wasn't locked. It didn't need to be. What was inside didn't belong to anyone else. She pulled it open and removed the folder. The top page bore Jim's signature, sharp, confident, unmistakably his even in the year before his death. It was dated, notarized, sealed in blue ink. His final will, signed 11 months before he stopped speaking altogether. Beneath it sat her addendum. The draft she and Tom Daly had started the same week Jim came home from the hospital for good. The pen she'd left inside still marked the last line she hadn't been ready to sign. Until now. She ran her hand over the paper once, then picked up the phone from its cradle. The number was still pinned beside it, scribbled in Jim's handwriting. Tom. Home. Office. Anywhere. It rang once. "Lena," Tom answered, his voice thick with recognition and readiness. "It's time to finalize what Jim started," she said. No tremble, no hesitation. A pause on the other end. "You want to revise?" Lena looked down at the will again, not at Jim's name, but at her own. The space she'd left open, the lines left unsigned. "No," she said. "I want to erase." Another silence. Then Tom exhaled. "I'll be there tomorrow morning. Bring everything. We'll make it permanent." Lena hung up. The click echoed like a door shutting between two eras. She didn't return to the kitchen. She didn't tell Mallory or glance out the window. She just opened the desk drawer again and took out a slim leather journal from the bottom, her ledger. Every home improvement, every tax payment, every insurance renewal for the last 40 years. Her record, not his, not theirs. Downstairs, the front door opened again. Dean's voice filtered up. "She didn't even say anything. It's like she doesn't understand what's coming." "Rita, she'll get it once the lawyer walks her through. People her age always get sentimental before they sign." Lena returned the ledger to the drawer. Then she picked up the pen she'd ignored for 11 months and placed it squarely at the center of her desk. She didn't sign, not yet. But she pulled out a blank sheet of paper, crisp, white, and ready. Lena hadn't cooked that night. She hadn't set the table, hadn't chosen the wine. But it was still her house, and every creak of the floorboards beneath Dean's heavy footsteps reminded her of it. Rita had swept in earlier that evening with grocery bags, ordering from her phone and sending Dean to the store twice, once for wine, once for the right kind of napkins. She took over the kitchen with the entitled flair of a hostess in someone else's mansion, barking about gluten-free options, lighting 3 conflicting scented candles, and rearranging Lena's spice rack without a word. Just one family dinner before everything gets formal, she chirped to Mallory, who responded only with a blink. At 7:02, Lena was poured a half glass of Cabernet and seated near the foot of the table, 2 chairs down from the head, the one Dean now occupied like he'd earned it. He carved the roast like a man running a meeting, talking over everyone. Rita hovered with a salad bowl she hadn't made. Mallory sat across from her grandmother, eyes darting between the 3 adults like a silent court stenographer. The conversation was flat and self-congratulatory. Rita listed Zillow comps on her phone. Dean compared property tax rates in other counties. Not once did they ask Lena what she wanted, only what the house might appraise at if we freshen up the kitchen. By 9:15, the wine bottles were empty and the chairs scraped back without thanks. Dean clapped his hands once and said, "Nice night, huh?" As if the house had thrown the dinner itself. Rita kissed Mallory on the cheek. "Be sure to tell your grandmother how grateful we are she's letting us host here." Then they left. No dishes, no cleanup, no apology. At 10:03, the dishwasher still hadn't been started. Lena stood barefoot at the sink, sleeves rolled up, her wedding band glinting under the overhead light as she scraped dried sauce from a serving platter. The windows were black mirrors, reflecting a woman no one had seen clearly in years. She didn't make noise. The soft clinks of glass and ceramic echoed through the kitchen like punctuation marks at the end of unfinished sentences. She wiped down the counters, dumped half-drunk glasses of wine, took out the trash, replaced a candle Rita had left flickering too close to a window pane. Then she saw it. A sheet of paper folded once, left on the counter beside an open real estate folder. Her name wasn't on it. No Mom or Lena to soften the blow. Just block text at the top. Suggested renovation ideas. Post-sale. She unfolded it with the same care one might give to an eviction notice. Bullet points, checkboxes, casual cruelty. Open up kitchen wall to expand space. Rip out laundry room for additional powder bath. Remove rose garden, too much maintenance? Possibly tear down garage for modern ADU rental? Ask attorney if she needs to sign before listing. She didn't sit down, just kept holding the paper like it was warm with fresh ink. A soft creak behind her. Mallory stood at the laundry room doorway, barefoot, hoodie zipped halfway up, eyes rimmed with exhaustion and fury. "You cleaned all this yourself?" she asked quietly. Lena nodded once, her expression unreadable. Mallory stepped further in. "Why don't you say something? To them?" The house hummed for a long beat, the old refrigerator, the water heater ticking behind the wall, the past decades breathing through the beams. Lena finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Because they'll hear me in court." The next morning arrived with a false calm. Golden light, bird song, the soft hiss of a sprinkler catching the edge of the porch. Lena sat on the swing with a mug of black coffee, her legs crossed at the ankles, the breeze tugging at the hem of her cardigan. Beside her, Marcy Novak sipped from a travel cup, eyes hidden behind sunglasses too large for her narrow face. "Is that your son walking around like he owns the place?" Marcy asked, dry as toast. Lena didn't answer. She didn't have to. Dean was inside, pacing from room to room, tapping numbers into the calculator app on his phone like he was appraising a foreclosure. Rita trailed behind him, holding her own phone at arm's length, flipping between Pinterest boards and Google search tabs. "If we knock out that wall, we could open it up for a kitchenette," Dean said, standing in the hallway outside Lena's old sewing room. "Then a divider here, make it 2 units, right? One upstairs, one downstairs? Or," Rita offered, pausing in the doorway to the basement, "we just convert the lower level entirely, add a separate entrance, rent it to a traveling nurse or something, passive income during retirement." Dean nodded, thumbs flying over his screen. "Smart. We'll recoup before year 3. Down the hall, Mallory sat on the stairs, earbuds in, but music paused. She wasn't listening to Taylor Swift, she was listening to them. Outside, Marcy leaned forward, lowering her voice. "They're measuring with rulers they didn't earn." Lena took a slow sip, then exhaled through her nose. "They think they're investors. Tell me you're handling this." "I am." From the porch, they could see Dean through the bay window, gesturing around the living room like he was mid-showing. Rita pointed to the ceiling fan, made a face, mimed replacing it. Marcy rolled her eyes. She better not touch those beams. My husband helped install them. She won't, Lena said calmly. Inside, Dean moved to the fireplace, still running numbers out loud. If we rent both units at market rate, we're talking, what, maybe $3,400 a month? Rita tilted her head. We should call the property manager this week. Just get some advice. Start lining things up. You don't think it's too soon? He asked, glancing at her. She smiled without warmth. It's called being prepared. Lena set her mug down and stood. Be right back, she murmured to Marcy. She walked inside without a sound. Through the kitchen, past the dining room, down the short hall and into her study, where the rotary phone still sat on the desk, like a loyal dog waiting for orders. She pulled open the drawer with her insurance files, found the policy folder, cross-checked the date of the last property renewal. Then she dialed. State Crest Insurance, how can I help you today? This is Lena Garrison. I need to update the ownership status of my property. There was a pause. Keys clicked. Yes, Mrs. Garrison, we still have you listed as primary. Good. I'd like to add clarification that there are no co-owners, sole proprietorship under the Living Trust, as of this year. Of course. Effective immediately? Lena's eyes narrowed at the sound of a drill starting in the garage. Yes, she said, effective 5 minutes ago. She hung up, closed the folder, and returned to the porch. Mallory met her in the doorway. Her arms were crossed. She didn't speak for a beat. Then, with careful precision, she asked, Are you sure this is even your house yet? Lena glanced past her, at the parade of movement inside, Dean measuring the pantry doorway, Rita taking a picture of the bathroom tile, like they were already building the listing. They're sure it is, Lena said softly. Mallory frowned. But legally? Before Lena could respond, Dean stepped out of the front door, phone still in hand. We're heading to the hardware store, he announced, eyes darting between them. You want anything while we're out? Lena didn't answer, but Marcy did, from her porch chair, lifting her sunglasses. Yeah, get yourselves a lease application. You're gonna need one. The courthouse smelled like old paper and forgotten promises. It was just after 9 a.m. when Lena walked through the glass doors, her heels tapping a deliberate rhythm across the tiled floor. She wore navy slacks, a pressed blouse, and her late husband's watch, still ticking, still hers. She carried a leather folder, slim and scuffed, the edges softened by time and resolve. Tom Daly was already waiting by the county clerk's office. He stood like a man who knew the weight of his own name, upright, sharp-eyed, even at 76. He tipped his head toward her in quiet greeting and took the folder from her hands. Everything signed? He asked. Lena nodded. Everything. They stepped to the counter together. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with bifocals and a mouthful of words she didn't care to say, scanned the documents with minimal ceremony. Tom pointed to the third page. Transfer of deed, executed last year, no co-owners, no shared rights. Jim Garrison listed Lena as sole owner while living, and the trust confirms it. The clerk barely looked up. Any contests pending? Nope, Tom said, and none possible. Behind them, the automatic door whooshed open. Marcy Novak stepped in, her handbag tucked under one arm, lipstick freshly applied like she was showing up for a portrait. She approached the counter and slid her ID across. Third-party witness, as requested, notarized and certified. The clerk clicked a stamp. 1, 2, 3 times. Initials, dates, seal. Just like that, decades of assumption disappeared into the county archive. Lena didn't smile, but her breath left her shoulders, and that was enough. Outside, the Idaho sun hit the steps like a spotlight. Tom handed her a copy of the updated title, neatly clipped. You're locked in now, he said. Full control. No room for interpretation. Lena looked down at the document, at her name in bold black letters where Dean's had never been and never would be. Jim was clearer than they thought, she murmured. Tom's phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably them, he muttered, glancing at the screen. You want me to take it? No, Lena said. Let them wait. Across town, Dean stood in the parking lot of a real estate office, sunglasses pushed up onto his forehead, pacing like a man whose deadline was running late. Rita leaned against the passenger side door, tapping out a text on her phone with her thumb. Dean pressed his phone to his ear. "You said you were pulling the comp sheet today. Did you get the title info back from the county?" The voice on the other end paused, then came a single sentence. "We can't proceed with the listing. The property's not in your name." Dean stopped moving. "What?" "There's a recorded title transfer from last year. Sole ownership by Lena Garrison. Fully executed. Clean. No co-signers." "She must have changed something," Dean said quickly. "Last minute. I need to talk to the attorney." "No," the voice said carefully. "She didn't change it. Your father did. He signed it over a year before his death." Dean's grip tightened around the phone. "Are you kidding me?" Rita's head snapped up from her screen. "What? What is it?" Dean just stared at the sidewalk as if it had betrayed him. "She can't list the house without me," he muttered. "It's mine. I'm the only child." "She doesn't need you," the voice replied. "She owns it. Flat." Rita grabbed the phone from his hand and shouted into the receiver, "He was her husband!" "What do you mean it's hers? He was your dad." The line went silent, then it disconnected. Dean's mouth opened and closed like he might yell, might curse, might explode. But instead he handed the phone back, turned toward the car, and slammed the door so hard the mirror shook. Inside the glove box his calculator was still running, but the numbers no longer mattered. 2 days after the courthouse filing, Lena was trimming dead roses in the front yard when she heard the SUV door slam. She didn't look up. The crunch of heels on gravel approached anyway, brisk, pointed, entitled. "Lena," Rita called out, her voice all forced cheer and faint warning. "Just here to walk the lot. Quick consult. Won't bother you." Behind her came a man in khakis and a pressed linen shirt, holding a blueprint tube and a digital tape measure. His polo had a logo stitched over the chest. Highland Ridge Architecture. "Hi, I'm Brent," he offered, extending a hand. "Here to take some measurements and discuss footprint options." Lena rose slowly, gloves in one hand, pruning shears in the other. "You weren't invited." Rita smiled as if the sun were too bright. "It's just preliminary. We're getting ideas down while we have momentum." From the porch next door, Marcy raised an eyebrow over her sunglasses. Her watering can froze mid-pour. Dean stepped out of the back seat, clipboard in hand. "It's not a big deal, Mom. We're not bulldozing anything. Yet." Lena said nothing. Brent knelt near the driveway and began unfurling the plans. "We'd start with the back patio, push out the rear wall about 10 feet, remove that garage." A loud creak interrupted him. The front door opened. Lena reappeared on the top step, a thick manila envelope in one arm and a rolled blueprint under the other, yellowed edges, creased from decades of reverence. She stepped down to the walkway, unfolded the original plans on the stone bench Jim had built with his own hands in 1982. She ran her finger across the penciled lines. "See this?" Brent leaned in. "Sure, that's your original structure?" "This was hand-drawn by my husband, before the foundation was poured, every wall, every window, every damn inch." Rita crossed her arms. "We're not erasing history, Lena. We're just modernizing. That back addition alone could add—" "There won't be any demolition," Lena said sharply, eyes still on the paper. "Not while I'm still alive. And not after either." Brent looked at Dean, then back at the plans. "Should I come back another time?" Dean shook his head, jaw flexing. "Just give us a second." Brent walked back to his car, slowly rolling up the plans. Dean turned toward Lena, nostrils flared. "You're being petty. You don't even live in the whole house anymore. Half those rooms are storage." "I'm not being petty," Lena said, finally looking at him. She folded the blueprint again. Neat, methodical. She tapped the corner of the envelope. "I'm being precise." Rita opened her mouth to argue, but the slam of a screen door cut through the tension. Marcy stepped onto her porch, barefoot, apron still dusted with flour. She leaned over the railing with her coffee mug like it was a podium. "Told you she wasn't soft," she said with a smirk. "But by all means, keep measuring things that don't belong to you." Dean's face colored, but he said nothing. Rita let out a short laugh. "It's not like we're trespassing." Lena raised an eyebrow. You're discussing architectural alterations on private property you neither own nor lease. A pause. Pretty sure that's trespassing. She turned and walked back inside without waiting for them to leave. Blueprint in one hand, envelope in the other. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut like a vault. Dean stared after her, red creeping up his neck. Rita turned to him. We need a different strategy. Dean nodded, staring down at his clipboard like it was a betrayal. Yeah? Starting with her lawyer. Tom Daly laid the new trust paperwork flat on the kitchen table, smoothing the corners like he was preparing a battlefield. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows of Lena's dining room, catching dust in the air. The table was cleared for once. No casseroles, no wine glasses, no guest plates. Just a black pen, a ceramic mug, and a woman with no intention of leaving her life's work to arrogance. Lena sat straight-backed, glasses perched low, eyes sharp behind the frames. Across from her, Mallory watched in silence, a sketchbook in her lap but unopened. The pencil never touched the paper. "You're certain?" Tom asked. "I was certain before you got here," Lena replied. He nodded, flipping to the signature page. "There's language here for medical proxy and durable power of attorney," he said. "You're naming Mallory?" "Yes." "Not Dean?" Lena didn't even blink. "Not Dean." Tom continued. "Rita's name appears in your emergency contact records from years ago, hospital authorizations, even your pharmacy file." "They can all be removed," Lena said, her voice even. "She's not family, not legally, not spiritually." Mallory blinked but stayed quiet. Tom uncapped the pen and pushed it toward her. "Once you sign this, it's in effect immediately." "I know." She signed. One stroke after another, deliberate and clean. No tremble in the hand, no hesitation in the eyes. By the time she was done, her name sealed the document like a steel trap. Tom set it aside, slid an envelope across the table. This one thinner, marked in black Sharpie Dean, settled in full. Lena glanced at it once before tucking it into a small metal file box by her feet. Mallory finally spoke. "What's in it?" Lena turned toward her granddaughter and, for a brief second, the storm in her eyes softened. $2, she said, exactly enough to prove I remembered him, and chose to leave him nothing. Tom cleared his throat, more out of respect than discomfort. "I'll file the updates first thing tomorrow. County records, healthcare directives, power of attorney, everything." Lena nodded. "And the title?" "Already locked under the trust name. No one touches it without your successor trustee's permission." Mallory looked up. "That's me?" Lena smiled faintly. "You've been watching quietly long enough. Now it's your turn to protect." The room was still for a beat, not empty, just filled with the gravity of what had shifted. Tom gathered his folders and stood. "I'll see myself out." Mallory walked him to the door. Lena stayed at the table, unmoving. As soon as Tom's car pulled away, Lena reached beneath the table and retrieved another envelope, one Dean had left the week after Jim died. It had been addressed to Mom, written with rushed strokes and a passive-aggressive underline. Inside was a handwritten note and a list of contractors. She tore it in half, then again, and dropped the pieces into the trash without ceremony. An hour later, Dean was pacing his driveway, holding his phone like it had personally betrayed him. "County just updated," he said to Rita, eyes scanning the screen. "Trust documents were filed this morning." "So?" she asked. Dean turned the screen to her. "You are no longer listed on any family assets. No home, no proxy, no access," he muttered. "She gave Mallory everything, even medical dot." Rita narrowed her eyes. "What about your name? You're her only child." "It's not in there. She didn't just forget." Dean swallowed hard. She didn't." Rita folded her arms. "Then you better make her remember." Dean stared across the street toward Lena's porch. Quiet, still, impenetrable. Dean stood at the service counter of the Boise Power and Light customer office, tapping his fingers on the laminate like a man used to getting what he wanted. "I just need to transfer the utility into my name," he said, slipping a smirk into his tone. "Ownership's a formality. We're handling the estate. It's family." The clerk, a woman in her 30s with a name tag that read Cassie, squinted at the screen. "You're not listed on the account." "I know," he said, laughing under his breath, "but the house is being transferred. My mother's elderly. I'll be managing everything moving forward." Cassie kept typing, then paused. "There's a note on the account." Dean leaned in. "Okay." Cassie frowned. "It says any change requests must be made directly by the account holder. No third-party modifications. Account access is frozen to all but Lena Garrison." Dean blinked. "What do you mean, frozen?" "She put a security freeze on the file this morning. Full lockdown. Password protected, audio authorization only." Dean's jaw tensed. "She doesn't even know how to—" Cassie looked up, blank-faced. "Well, apparently she does." Back at the house, Lena was standing at the control panel in the hallway, inputting a new security code. The keypad beeped once, then again. Accepted. She turned off the motion sensors. Waited. Then she logged into the home network, one window open on her laptop showing system access logs. Another window held the Ring security dashboard. A list of names appeared under authorized users. She removed Dean Garrison with a tap, then Rita Garrison. Then she changed the network password, retitled the home profile, Garrison House, Legacy Locked. Downstairs, Mallory sat on the couch with a blanket over her knees and a mug of herbal tea. She was pretending to scroll through TikTok but watching her grandmother instead. "Need help?" she asked. "No," Lena said without looking up. "I already helped myself." Later that afternoon, Mallory's phone buzzed. Rita Garrison calling. She debated letting it go, but something in her gut said, "Hear them panic." She answered. "Hey." Rita's voice came through taut, too sweet by half. "Mallory, honey, would you mind talking to your grandmother? She's acting a little out of sorts lately." Mallory raised an eyebrow. "Out of sorts?" "She's changing passwords, locking us out of things, refusing to discuss transitional plans. She's changing her passwords, on her things." Rita sighed. "We're trying to make things easier for her. We're trying to help, but she's being stubborn." "No," Mallory said quietly. "She's being clear." A pause. Static. Then Rita's voice sharpened. "She's turning you against us." "No," Mallory replied. "You did that all by yourselves." She hung up. That evening, Dean pulled into the driveway without texting, calling, or knocking. He walked up the steps like he still had a key in his pocket, hand outstretched toward the doorknob. The door didn't open. Instead, a motion-activated chime rang from above the porch. A camera lens tilted toward him with an audible click. His phone buzzed a second later. A video. Dean opened it. It was a clip from 3 days ago, him stomping through the backyard gate without permission, Rita standing behind him with her phone raised, narrating renovation ideas. The video ended. Then a message from an unknown number. "Next time, try the front door, or don't try at all." Inside the house, Lena sat at the dining table again, the lights dimmed low, the hum of security systems audible in the background. She reached over, tapped her laptop, and checked the alert log. Green across the board. "Everything okay?" Mallory asked from the hallway. "Better than ever," Lena said. She turned the laptop around. The new Ring camera showed Dean's car reversing out of the driveway, slow, silent, uninvited. The conference room at Daly and Archer was smaller than Lena expected, quiet, unadorned, and smelling faintly of eucalyptus and toner. She sat at the long walnut table, her purse placed neatly beside a stack of fresh legal documents. Tom Daly was to her left, sleeves rolled, glasses low on his nose. Across from him sat a woman in a gray skirt suit, hair pinned up, eyes sharp, a third-party estate attorney named Sheila Penner, neutral, unshakable, paid in full. "Are you ready?" Sheila asked. Lena nodded once. "Yes, completely." Tom handed her a black pen. "This makes it irrevocable." Lena looked down at the final page, not just a signature line, but a legacy, a choice. She signed. First her name, then her initials on every relevant page. By the time she slid the pen back, the room felt lighter. "Copies will be sent to all relevant parties via certified mail within 24 hours, Sheila said, already organizing the pages. This supersedes any prior estate documentation. No contest clause is embedded on page 11. Tom glanced at Lena. You want to say anything else before we send it out? Lena's fingers brushed the edge of her teacup. Just one note. She opened her purse, pulled out a handwritten sheet in her cursive. My burial preference. I'd like to be placed beside Jim, under my maiden name, Lillian Grace Rowan. He said once that's who he fell in love with first. Tom took the note, folded it gently, and slid it into the file. Sheila sealed the envelope with a practiced swipe of her hand. It's done. 3 days later, Dean found the letter in his mailbox. Certified, return receipt requested. The envelope bore the clean insignia of Penner and Daly, estate and legacy law. He tore it open with a butcher knife from the kitchen. Rita looked up from the couch, where Zillow tabs were still open on her laptop. What is it? Dean scanned the first page, then the second, faster now, hands starting to shake. He flipped to the list of named beneficiaries, and then to the exclusions. Dean Michael Garrison, intentionally omitted, no claim to real property, financial assets, heirlooms, or titles. Rita Lillian Garrison, non-relative by law, excluded by choice, no claims permitted. He dropped the papers onto the counter like they were burning his palms. She disinherited us, he said aloud, like it wasn't real until he heard it. Rita stood. What? He turned, eyes wild now. She named Mallory for everything. Everything. Rita snatched the documents and flipped through. No. This can't be legal. This isn't how family works. Dean slammed his fist against the counter. This isn't family. This is war. Then fight, she snapped. You're her son. I was her son, he said bitterly. She doesn't think so anymore. Across town, Mallory stood in the upstairs hallway, staring at a sealed envelope in her own name. It had arrived that morning, addressed in Tom's clean script. She hadn't opened it yet. Lena stood beside her. You can wait, Lena said gently. There's no pressure. Mallory looked up. Is it everything? Lena's eyes didn't waver. It's what you've already earned. The rest is just paperwork. Mallory nodded once and slipped the envelope into her art portfolio without opening it. Then it can wait. That evening, Lena stood at the edge of the backyard garden, where the late summer lights spilled over the fence like warm honey. She pressed her palms into the soil, closed her eyes. This was the land where she had buried roots, not just seeds. The doorbell rang. She didn't move. Mallory answered. Through the Ring camera, Dean's face appeared on the screen, red-eyed, desperate. Tell her I want to talk. Mallory spoke through the speaker. Calm, clear. She doesn't owe you any more conversations. He looked straight into the camera. This isn't over. From inside, Lena whispered to herself, Oh, Dean, for you, it is. The knock came early, too early for anything decent. Lena was in the kitchen, slicing lemons for iced tea when the doorbell followed. Not one polite chime, 5, in quick, agitated succession. She didn't flinch. The camera feed on her phone lit up before she even had to check it. Dean and Rita. Again, standing on her porch like squatters in denial. He was pacing. She was texting. Lena set down the knife, wiped her hands, walked to the hallway console and tapped the intercom icon. Her voice came through the porch speaker, calm, cold, and unmistakable. You don't live here anymore. Dean's head snapped toward the camera. Mom, come on. Just open the door. Rita stepped up behind him, holding a manila folder like it was leverage. We just want to talk. Civilly. One conversation. Lena watched them from inside, unmoved. You had years of conversations. You weren't listening then. You're not owed one now. Dean's tone pitched higher. You're really not going to even face us? After everything? Lena walked back to the kitchen without another word. The speaker shut off with a muted click. On the back patio, Marcy Novak had already claimed her usual chair under the umbrella, flipping through the Sunday crossword and sipping from a floral tumbler. You hear the commotion out front? She asked. Lena stepped outside with 2 glasses of iced tea, lemon slices floating gently at the top. They brought a folder this time, probably some threat dressed as paperwork. Marcy scoffed. They'll learn. Paper burns faster than memory. They clinked glasses. The summer air was warm, the shade just enough to make it bearable. Cicadas buzzed somewhere beyond the fence. Inside, Mallory stood by the upstairs window, watching the porch. She didn't open it. She didn't speak. Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed, "Respect the boundary." She hit send. Dean's phone buzzed a moment later. He looked down, scoffed, then shoved it in his pocket like the message stung too much to read twice. "Did you know she left us $2? Rita hissed. "Two, as in literally. That's not an oversight, that's symbolic cruelty." Dean muttered, "She's not well. She's been manipulated. We could argue undue influence. Mallory's barely 17. Rita cut him off. "She's 17 and smarter than both of us." Dean's face twitched. "I swear," Rita muttered, "this isn't how family treats each other." Inside, Lena's voice came through the speaker again, this time from the back porch camera. "That's what I've been saying. For years." Dean looked up sharply, realizing he was still on record. Rita stepped back off the porch. "We look like lunatics standing here." Dean didn't move. He stared straight into the lens and said, "We're not done." But the camera light blinked off. No audience. Back in the garden, Lena leaned back in her chair. Marcy glanced over. "You okay?" Lena sipped her tea, unbothered. "I spent most of my marriage learning when to speak. I'm finally learning when not to." Marcy smiled. "You know they're not going to stop." "I know," Lena said, eyes closed, face turned to the breeze. "But they're going to get tired long before I do." It started with a headline on page A3 of the Idaho Courier, "Boise Widow Reclaims Legacy After Family Dispute." A half-column piece, black and white photo. No quotes from Lena. Just her silhouette. Standing in her garden, head bowed slightly, hand resting on the porch railing. The light caught her wedding band, her face in profile. The caption read, "Lena Garrison, 72, remains in the foothills home she helped build and preserve." By noon, the phones had started buzzing. Neighbors clipped the article and left it in mailboxes. The mail carrier paused at her gate just to say, "Nice to see justice in print." Even the grocery clerk at Ridgeview Market offered her paper bags free of charge. Lena didn't know the article existed until Mallory knocked on her door holding a framed copy wrapped in brown paper and twine. "You're famous," Mallory said. Lena raised a brow. "What did you do?" "Not me." Lena untied the twine and pulled the frame free. Her eyes scanned the headline, then the lead. "A quiet legal battle in the Boise foothills ends with a widow's quiet triumph, and the preservation of a family legacy threatened by entitlement, not time." She read in silence. The article never mentioned Dean or Rita by name, but the subtext was sharp enough to draw blood. At the bottom of the page, in small italics, was the source line, "Story submitted to the Western States Editorial Fellowship by Marcy Novak, longtime neighbor and witness to the Garrison family's generational home." Lena let out a long, quiet exhale. She told it. "She submitted it to some regional contest," Mallory explained. "It got picked up by the paper. No one's mad." Lena studied the photo. "I didn't even know it was taken." Mallory smirked. "She caught you on the porch last week, said you looked like the storm before the calm." Lena's lips twitched, a near smile. "She wasn't wrong," Lena said softly. "I never raised my voice, but they heard me anyway." Dean stared at the article in his kitchen, coffee forgotten, mug cooling on the counter beside the still unopened legal envelope from Lena's attorney. Rita paced behind him, phone in hand, scrolling. "She called you entitled by assumption," she hissed. "That's libel." "She didn't say my name," Dean muttered, jaw clenched. "But everyone will know it's us." "She said you threatened demolition of a historic home." "She's a neighbor, not a damn judge." Dean yanked open his laptop. Fingers flew across the keyboard. He pulled up the Courier's site, searched the editorial department, and began typing. "Rebuttal. My name is Dean Garrison, and I am the son of Lena Garrison. Your recent article is misleading and defamatory." He typed fast. Furious. Defensive. Then he hit send. He sat back and waited. 2 hours later, a single-line email arrived from the Courier's editorial desk. "Thank you for your response. At this time, we will not be publishing a rebuttal. No explanation, no offer for equal word count, just a quiet, polite no. Rita read the message and sank into the nearest chair. "She beat you," she said flatly. Dean didn't reply. She looked at him again, harder this time. "She beat us without ever saying your name." That evening, Marcy knocked on Lena's back door with a peach cobbler and a folded copy of the article's print run. "They asked if I wanted to do a follow-up column," she said. "I said no." Lena poured 2 glasses of iced tea. "They wanted to know what I thought you'd say next," Marcy added, settling into the chair beside her. Lena took a sip, slow and deliberate. "I won't say anything next." "No?" "I've already said everything that mattered," Lena replied. "Now it's just the echo." The brass plaque arrived in a velvet-lined box. Mallory carried it into the house with both hands, the weight of it heavier than expected. She placed it on the kitchen table beside Lena's tea and opened the lid. The letters gleamed, freshly etched and impossible to misread. Garrison House. Established 1976, designated private heritage residence. Lena stared at it for a long moment. Then she reached out and ran her fingers along the raised metal, eyes distant. "He always wanted the name to outlast the roof," she murmured. Mallory smiled. "Now it will." The paperwork had been filed weeks ago, a trademark on the name Garrison House, the land registered as a heritage site through a private preservation fund Lena had quietly joined under her maiden name, a legal wall, unscalable, permanent. The listing now appeared in the Idaho Historical Registry as non-transferable, non-commercial, non-rentable. Future renovations required trustee approval. Commercial use was strictly prohibited, including any conversion into a business or bed and breakfast, which made Dean's next move instantly useless. In a downtown co-working space, Dean sat across from a smirking marketing consultant who had just closed his laptop. "Look," the guy said, "you've got the design, the mock-ups, even a pitch deck, but the name's off limits. You can't trademark what's already been protected federally." Dean blinked. "It's my family name." The consultant shrugged. "Doesn't matter, she trademarked it, filed it through a heritage trust. You try to use it commercially and you'll get sued?" Dean's hands curled into fists. This was supposed to be a legacy project, a way to rebuild the narrative. "Then you should have controlled the story before she did." Back in the foothills, Lena stood at the gate while Mallory secured the plaque into the stone post. The drill buzzed. The bolts tightened. When it was done, the name caught the sunlight just enough to shine. Marcy stood on her own porch across the way, arms folded, nodding in approval. "Looks better than any listing photo I've ever seen." "It's not for sale," Lena called back. "I know," Marcy replied. "That's why it matters." Inside the house, Mallory sat at the dining room table with her laptop open. On the screen was a new homepage, garrisonhouse76.org. A gallery of old family photos, scanned house blueprints, scanned newspaper clippings, even a copy of Jim's handwritten note on the first foundation pour. "This should go live tomorrow," Mallory said, tilting the screen toward Lena. "It's not just a house anymore, it's a story, one that can't be rewritten by anyone else." Lena watched the images flash by. Christmas mornings, Mallory's 3rd birthday, Jim on the ladder fixing the gutters in a winter coat too thin for the job. Then a grainy photo of Lena and Jim on the porch in 1981, her hand on his knee, his face lit with something fierce and gentle at once. She reached out, tapped the corner of the screen. "That one," she said. "Make it the banner." Meanwhile, Rita sat alone in their apartment, drafts of emails open and unsent. Subject lines like, "We deserve a conversation," and "Let's be reasonable," Lena floated mid-screen. She hit send on one, no reply. She tried again, from a different address. Still nothing. "Blocked," she whispered. Dean walked in the door moments later, threw his keys onto the counter and sat heavily at the table. "The proposal's dead." "She trademarked the house," Rita muttered. "The name, too." Dean didn't reply. He just stared blankly ahead. After a long silence, Rita asked, "What were we actually fighting for?" Dean's voice was low. "Control." Rita stood, picked up her phone, and left the room. That night, Lena sat on the back steps as the foothills swallowed the sun. Mallory stepped outside and joined her without a word. They watched the sky turn indigo. "She took everything you gave her for granted," Mallory said. "All of it." Lena nodded slowly. "They didn't know what they had," Mallory added. "No," Lena agreed, "but they sure as hell know what they lost." The envelope came certified, stamped in red, "Notice of Civil Complaint, Ada County District Court." Lena didn't flinch when she opened it. She'd been expecting the final tantrum. Dean was suing her on grounds of undue influence, mental incapacitation, and elder financial abuse. Filed under his own name, but drafted with Rita's legal whispering behind him. They were calling her manipulated, fragile, unfit. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so predictable. Lena placed the complaint on the kitchen table beside her teacup. Then she picked up the phone. "Tom," she said, "it's time." 2 weeks later, Lena stepped through the heavy wooden doors of the courthouse with Tom Daly on her right and Mallory on her left. Marcy followed close behind, a canvas tote on her shoulder and a purse full of bite-sized mints she had no intention of sharing. Lena wore navy again, the same suit she'd worn to the title office. Her posture was straight, eyes steady, lips drawn in the kind of calm that comes from watching storms form and pass, and knowing exactly when to take shelter. In the courtroom, Dean sat at the plaintiff's table, tapping a pen against his legal pad with nervous rhythm. Rita sat behind him, not technically part of the filing, but dressed like she was starring in her own silent defense. The judge entered. Court was called to order, and with that, the final round began. "Mr. Garrison claims," the judge began, "that the trust and will were executed under undue pressure from third parties, that the defendant was not of sound mind or free will, that this constitutes legal overreach and potential abuse of an elderly person, correct?" Dean's attorney stood. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge turned to Tom. "Mr. Daly, you were the original co-signer on the deed and now counsel on the trust?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you witness the defendant's signatures on the relevant documents?" "I did." "And can you confirm, was she under duress, manipulated, coerced, or cognitively impaired at the time?" Tom's face didn't change. "She was sharp as hell, sir. Still is." A ripple of restrained laughter moved through the courtroom. The judge smiled faintly. "I'll take that as a no." He turned toward Lena. "Mrs. Garrison, do you understand the nature of the documents you signed? The deed transfer, the living trust, the exclusionary clauses?" "I do." "Did anyone force or trick you into those decisions?" Lena looked directly at Dean. "No," she said, "but they certainly gave me every reason to make them." The judge turned back to Dean. "You were not listed in any documents. Not the deed, not the trust, not the will. You were legally disinherited prior to any challenge. On what basis do you claim standing?" Dean shifted, jaw tight. "She's my mother." "That is not a legal argument," the judge said flatly. "It is a fact, and one she revoked rights from with clear authority." Rita leaned forward from the bench behind him, whispering something urgent. Dean's attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we believe there's evidence of manipulation through third parties." "Do you have any witnesses?" the judge interrupted. "Any medical records, video evidence, statements?" "No, but..." "Then you don't have a case." The gavel struck once. "This court finds no grounds for complaint. The trust stands. The will stands. The deed is protected. Case dismissed with prejudice." Dean's attorney blinked. "Your Honor, if we could just..." "With prejudice," the judge repeated, "which means permanently. You may not refile." Silence. Then Lena stood. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "I'd like to request a protective order barring future legal harassment from both Mr. Garrison and anyone acting on his behalf." The judge considered it. "Granted." He looked at Dean pointedly. "No more filings, no more letters, no more attempts." Dean's mouth opened, but no words came. The judge stood and exited. So did the clerk. The bailiff opened the doors. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Tom exhaled a long breath. "Never seen a ruling that clean," he said. Lena adjusted her coat. "Because it wasn't a legal case. It was a temper tantrum." Marcy handed her a mint. "You buried him, honey." Tom added quietly, "You buried him twice." Dean stood in the parking lot staring at his phone. No reception. No recourse. Nothing left to say. Rita sat in the car, door closed, sunglasses on. He didn't get in. He just stood there, watching Lena walk away. The cedar chest creaked when it opened, not from rust, but from reverence. The kind of wood that aged with purpose, that remembered every winter and still smelled faintly of lavender and old tobacco. Lena pulled back the lid with both hands and paused. Sunlight from the bay window slanted across the polished floor, catching the dust in delicate swirls. Mallory knelt beside her, knees tucked beneath her. She didn't speak. She knew better. Inside the chest was the life no one else had asked to understand. A velvet pouch with a pearl ring and matching earrings, a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a navy ribbon, the original blueprint Jim had drawn of the house, pencil marks sharp, measurements handwritten, a black and white photo of Lena in a floral dress beside Jim in suspenders, holding hands on what would become their front porch, and then, near the bottom, wrapped in a linen napkin, a single silver fork. "The last piece from our wedding registry," Lena murmured, holding it up. Everything else disappeared over the years, but this one never wandered. Mallory turned it over gently, her fingers brushing the engraving. G and R, 1976. "Why a fork?" she asked softly. "Because Jim said it was the most useful. Knives made things sharp, spoons made things smooth, but forks—" Lena smiled faintly. "They helped carry what mattered." She placed it in Mallory's hands. One by one, the heirlooms came out, not in any particular order, but in the rhythm of memory. A pressed flower from their 10th anniversary, a receipt for their first mortgage payment, a faded hospital bracelet from when Dean was born. Lena placed that one aside without comment. They carried the items to the parlor, laying each on the sideboard like an exhibit. Mallory arranged them with the care of a curator, not a collector. Later, they walked the garden paths. Hydrangeas leaned into the sunlight. The gravel crunched beneath their feet. Mallory looked at the house, then at her grandmother. "Will they ever get it?" she asked. Lena stopped walking. "They didn't want the roots," she said. "Just the roof." Mallory looked back at the garden. "But you grew both." Lena said nothing. She didn't need to. That afternoon, Marcy knocked at the back door holding a warm peach pie in one hand and a dusty leather-bound book in the other. "I figured this belongs with the rest of the relics," she said, grinning. Lena's eyes widened. "Is that—" "The old guest book," Marcy confirmed. "From 1976 to, well, until Dean's graduation party. It's been living in my closet since your remodel. Thought you might want to resurrect it." They set it on the dining table, flipping through the pages. Aunt Clara's swirly signature, Jim's sketch of a chimney with the caption, "Finally stood up straight." A lipstick kiss from Lena's college roommate beside a note that read, "He's a keeper, so are you." Mallory traced the pages like scripture. "Want to sign it?" Lena asked, offering the pen. Mallory looked at her. "Really?" Lena nodded. "You've earned the ink." Mallory wrote slowly, the way one writes history while living it. Next in line, with respect, Mallory Grace Rowan Garrison. She closed the book and ran her fingers along the worn leather cover. "It feels like something sacred." "It is," Lena said, "because now it's not just about memory. It's about stewardship." They stood there a long while, 3 generations of silence, of survival, of choosing legacy over resentment. That evening, Lena placed the heirlooms back into the chest, one by one, except the fork. That she left out. She set it on the kitchen table, beside a place setting with no name, just linen, porcelain, and silver. When Mallory walked in to make tea, she saw it, and smiled. "You setting the table for ghosts now?" "No," Lena said. "For someone who never asked to be remembered, but was." Across town, Dean sat in the dark with a drink in hand and a browser window open. He hovered over the homepage of GARRISONHOUSESEVENTYSIX.org. The banner was up, his parents, the porch, the past. He stared at it like it was a crime scene, but no matter how long he looked, there was no place for his name. The morning arrived without fanfare, just the hush of early light and the slow awakening of the foothills. Lena was already on the porch when the sun crested the ridge. Her rocking chair creaked under her, the same one Jim had sanded and stained during their second winter. The porch boards whispered with every shift of her weight. Nothing else moved. Steam rose from the mug in her hands. Her gaze drifted to the gate, where the brass plaque now caught the sunlight like a mirror. Garrison House. Established 1976, designated private heritage residence. For the first time in months, there was no tension curled between her shoulders, no documents to sign, no lawyers on speed dial, no footsteps where they didn't belong, just wood, stone, sky, and silence. The screen door clicked behind her. Mallory stepped out barefoot, 2 mugs of coffee in hand and a spiral notebook tucked under her arm. "I made it strong today," she said, handing her one. Lena took it, sipped, then nodded. "Good. The day deserves it." Mallory sat cross-legged on the porch swing, flipped the notebook open to a fresh page. "Summer project," she said. "Document every room. Photos, stories, blueprints, inventory. Start with the one they tried to erase you from." Lena looked over at her, surprised. Then she smiled. "My study." "Figured," Mallory said. "It still smells like lemon oil and arguments." Lena laughed. The kind that came from deep old lungs and didn't care if it startled the birds. Across the hedge, Marcy stepped onto her porch in her robe, coffee mug in hand, and gave a lazy salute. Lena nodded back. "Don't let her fool you," she muttered. "That woman could hold this whole block hostage with nothing but sarcasm and a water hose." Mallory grinned. "She's part of the legacy now." They sipped in silence. The breeze lifted the corner of the welcome mat. A blue jay landed on the railing, pecked twice, then flew off again like it had somewhere better to be. A few minutes later, a car pulled up the drive. Tom Daly stepped out with his usual leather briefcase and a large manila envelope in hand. "Annual trust summary," he said, holding it up before he even reached the steps. "Boring stuff, but official." Lena rose and met him at the top stair. He handed her the envelope. "You know, most people your age dread these check-ins." "I'm not most people," she said. "I earned this boredom." He smiled. "The house is fully paid, taxes cleared, trust active, no new challenges. You're as untouchable as the Constitution." Lena tucked the envelope under her arm. "Just how I like it." Tom gave Mallory a nod, then stepped back toward his car. "You'll let me know when the site expansion goes live?" he asked. Mallory gave a thumbs up. "Uploading the audio recordings next. Nana finally let me digitize the one of her and Jim singing on the porch." Tom's face softened. "That'll undo people in the best way." Then he got in his car and drove off, leaving only the hum of gravel behind him. Inside the house, the floorboards held their stories like scars, walked in, weathered, forgiven. The walls had been painted, patched, and painted again. But Lena could still see the ghost outlines of old photos that once hung beside the stairs. Every room had memory baked into its seams, but none of it belonged to the ones who'd tried to steal it. Not anymore. Mallory slipped inside to begin her inventory. Lena stayed on the porch, one hand resting on the rail, the other still around her mug. Her eyes drifted down the long gravel drive, now framed by freshly trimmed hedges and wild roses. Not a soul in sight. She breathed in, and for the first time since Jim's passing, she felt something close to rest. Not peace, not forgiveness, but rest. The kind that came from winning the long way, by choosing patience over fury, legacy over blood, and silence over spectacle. She set the mug down and stepped back inside. The door clicked softly shut, and her voice, spoken to no one, just the air and the house that heard everything, floated through the front hall like the final page of a novel. He rolled his eyes at my grief. I rolled the deed over his pride and sealed it with silence.